first 50 years of the Hippodrome are being put to pen and paper. TV 20's Ethan Badowski gives us a bit of a Gainesville history lesson from the book's author.
Richard Gartee is the man who took on the challenge of documenting 50 years of history at the Hippodrome. He began the journey in 2018 and called it a passion project, as someone who claims to have seen every play at the Hippodrome since 1977.
I think the most rewarding part has been just preserving the history of it and reacquainting people who are newer to Gainesville with what that rich history is like.
Shamrock McShane is a fellow author himself and published a glowing review of Gartee's work.
I think the book is a wonderful, wonderful thing. It's so great that Richard has done this because a theater disappears. It's not like movies, and he has chronicled 50 years of this institution that's made a difference in the whole culture, not only of Gainesville, but I think in the Southeast.
Gartee gave a presentation to the Writers Alliance of Gainesville discussing his writing process. He says after some of the founders of the Hippodrome died, he decided he needed to preserve the history now before it went away.
They managed to catch the attention of playwrights and directors from London, from New York. The city of Gainesville really got this wonderful theater that brought New York level theater to Gainesville.
It's the greatest theater in the Southeast, that's all I can say.
The book is currently available for purchase, and you can buy it online or at the Matheson History Museum, Eileen's Gator Store in Thornbrook Village, or at Book Gallery West. In Gainesville, Ethan Badowski, TV 20 News.